The Canadian supply truck was not supposed to stop. It was late winter, deep in Europe, and the road ahead was nothing but white silence. Snow covered the trees, the fields, even the old fence posts that once marked villages now long abandoned. The crew had been driving for hours, focused on reaching their next checkpoint before nightfall. Inside the cab, the heater hummed. No one spoke much. Then the driver slowed. "Did you hear that?" he asked quietly. At first it sounded like the wind, thin, broken, almost unreal, but then it came again, softer, higher, a sound that didn't belong to the forest. Crying. The truck rolled to a stop. The men stepped out into the freezing air, boots crunching on snow hardened like ice. The sound was faint but unmistakable now. Not one voice, several, weak, desperate. They followed it toward a shallow ditch near the tree line. There, half buried beneath snow and old blankets, they saw movement. A small hand. Then another. 10 children lay huddled together, barely visible under layers of frozen fabric. Their faces were pale, lips blue, eyes wide with fear. The oldest couldn't have been more than 12. The youngest looked no older than 4. They weren't soldiers. They weren't part of any plan. They were just children trying to survive the cold. One of the Canadians knelt immediately, brushing snow away with shaking hands. "They're alive," he said, "but not for long." The crew didn't hesitate. Coats were pulled off. Blankets were wrapped around small bodies. Someone ran back to the truck for hot water. Another lifted a child whose crying had already faded into silence. The road could wait. Orders could wait. Right now, 10 lives depended on what they did next, and none of them were walking away. The inside of the truck felt warmer, but not warm enough. The Canadian crew wrapped the children in every blanket they had. Coats were layered on top of coats. Someone rubbed small hands gently, trying to bring feeling back into frozen fingers. Another man held a cup of warm water close, careful not to rush it. The children barely spoke. One of them whispered a word in German. Another just stared, eyes glassy, fighting sleep. The youngest had stopped crying entirely, his head resting against a soldier's chest. That worried them the most. "Keep him awake," one man said quietly. "Talk to him. Anything." They broke the rules then. The truck turned away from its assigned route and headed for the nearest field medical post. The road was rough, the snow deeper than before, and visibility dropped with every passing minute. If they got stuck, help might not come in time. No one mentioned that out loud. One soldier sat in the back the entire way, holding 2 children close, whispering calm words they probably didn't understand. But the tone mattered more than the language. Slowly, color returned to pale cheeks. A cough, a small shiver, then a weak cry. Alive. When the truck finally reached the medical station, medics rushed out, surprised by what they saw. 10 children, cold, exhausted, but breathing. As they were carried inside, one of the older boys turned his head and reached out, grabbing the sleeve of the soldier who had held him. He didn't say, "Thank you." He didn't need to. The grip said enough. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering the tracks on the road, as if the moment had never happened. But for 10 children, everything had changed. The warmth came slowly. Inside the small medical station, the children lay wrapped in clean blankets. Steam rising gently from damp clothes hung near the stove. Medics worked quietly, checking pulses, listening to breathing, nodding with cautious relief. "They'll make it," one of them finally said. The Canadian crew didn't cheer, they didn't smile. They just exhaled, as if they had been holding their breath since the moment they heard crying in the snow. For the first time, the children began to speak. They had been fleeing with adults days earlier, moving from village to village as the fighting shifted. Somewhere along the way, they were separated. Night came fast. The cold came faster. They hid where they could and waited. They didn't expect anyone to hear them. One soldier left his gloves on a chair beside a bed. Another placed a chocolate bar near a child's hand and quietly walked away, pretending it meant nothing. The smallest boy slept for hours without waking, his chest rising steadily. By morning, color had returned to their faces. Orders arrived soon after. The truck would move on. The war did not pause for moments like this. Before leaving, the crew stopped by the beds one last time. The children watched them silently. No one cried now. The oldest boy stood up, straightened himself, and nodded, awkwardly, seriously, as if trying to act older than he was. Years later, none of their names would appear in reports. No medals would mention the detour. No photograph would fully explain what happened that night. But 10 children lived. And somewhere on a snow-covered road, a choice had been made: to stop, to listen, and to care. Sometimes that was enough. The truck disappeared down the road before the sun fully rose. Snow began to fall again, slowly erasing the tracks left behind. By noon, the road looked empty, quiet, untouched, as if nothing extraordinary had happened there at all. But inside the medical station, life continued. The children ate warm food for the first time in days. They spoke more now, voices still soft but steady. Laughter returned in small, careful pieces, like something fragile that had to be handled gently. They would be transferred later, reunited with relatives where possible, cared for until the war finally loosened its grip on their lives. As for the Canadian crew, they never spoke of the night as something special. They didn't write letters about it. They didn't tell stories in bars. To them, it was simply the moment they chose to stop. Years later, history would record battles, movements, victories, and losses. But it would never record the sound of crying in the snow, or the choice to listen. Still, 10 people grew up because of it. Sometimes the greatest acts of humanity happen far from cameras, medals, or applause. Just a road, a storm, and someone who refused to drive past. Years passed. The war ended, borders changed, cities rebuilt themselves from ruins. New roads replaced old ones. Snow still fell every winter, just as it always had. Most people never knew what happened on that quiet road. But 10 children grew up. Some remembered only fragments: the cold, the dark, the sound of a truck engine cutting through the storm. Others remembered a voice that sounded calm when everything else felt lost. Strong arms, warm blankets, a moment when the night didn't win. They went on to live ordinary lives, families, jobs, children of their own. And somewhere far away, the men who stopped that truck returned home, carrying the memory without ever naming it heroism. To them, it wasn't a story. It was simply the right thing to do. History often celebrates the loudest moments, but sometimes the most important ones are quiet. A cry in the snow, a choice to listen, and a road where someone decided not to drive past. That was enough.